Hey everyone. So today I have the absolute honor to introduce and bring to you a complete legend, Andrew Ackerman. If you don't know who he is, like I say, I highly advise go check him out. Andrew currently is a managing director of Dreamit Ventures. He's one of the pioneers of New York City tech scene. He has done multiple things in his short career, and today we are going to learn from him and all the lessons that he has learned so far. So, Andrew, thank you so much for joining us.
Totally my pleasure.
Andrew, I am totally, I feel very honored. Usually you're on this side of the table. You're doing the interview, and the fact that I have to interview now,
That's fine. You do it better than I do.
you do a pretty good job. So, take us back before Dream It, before Bunk One, before Layer Cupcake or
Layer
Cake,
cake, yeah.
Layer Cake, and everything else you have done. Where are you from, and what's your upbringing like?
Sure, no worries. As you could probably tell from the accent, I'm Israeli. Yeah, I know. It's kind of a chance. My parents are both American. My dad was in med school, so I happen to be born in Israel. And I like to joke that Israeli citizenship is a little bit like herpes. It's mildly inconvenient at times, and you can't get rid of it. But I'm proud also to be, Israelis as well as American. Been living here since I was 2.5 years old. Had to actually learn Hebrew the hard way because they spoke English to me at home,
Really?
thinking they would stay there. So I got back to the States, had a passport, and I couldn't speak Hebrew. And I grew up mostly in the city and then in the suburbs. I got the heck out of the suburbs the moment I turned 18. I went to school down in Baltimore at Johns Hopkins, and I went to business school in Chicago. It's ironic, they made one of these BS lists of like the top 300 party schools in the U.S. Hopkins came in at 297. Then there was Annapolis
Okay.
and Brigham Young, and then University of Chicago. So I'm the only person that went down on that list short of joining the Navy or becoming a Mormon. The business school, though, was a little different. It was fun. I liked Chicago. I then moved back to New York. Then I moved back to Chicago for 2 years. And then I moved back to New York.
So you really like the quiet life, no partying, huh? Really attracted you.
Listen, if I weren't a New Yorker before,
Mm-hmm.
I'd have been very happy with Chicago. It's a very nice town. It's just not New York.
Right. So you graduate college. You went to places where you didn't have to party. So I'm assuming you probably studied a lot.
Yeah, that's the other thing. If I'd gone to a more fun school, I might not have gotten into the University of Chicago.
So you graduate with Dean honors, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think so. It's been a long time. I'd have to check my own transcript.
And what did you do after college? What was your?
So after college, I went straight to business school.
Okay.
I think I was actually the youngest person in the grade because they only took a handful of us straight through.
Right.
And also, I'm a December baby. So it's
Okay.
not that big an accomplishment. It wasn't like I was 12 when I got my MBA. But it was interesting. It was a different experience in some ways. After I finished my MBA, I was a consultant for 4 years for what at the time was called Booz Allen and Hamilton. Then it kind of split into two parts. It was called Booz & Co. Still a pretty cool name. And then it got acquired by one of the big, I guess it was like the big four accounting firms at the time, and they rebranded it Strategy and. So that, yeah, now it's a sentence fragment. Worst name ever. But it was good. It was like traveling a lot, different cities, worked out of London, worked out of Cleveland, worked out of Houston, all different places. Good people, smart people, but also big, slow companies. So it wasn't really what I wanted to do long term. Coming up on 1999, the first boom is happening. It's not happening in Chicago. So I figure I could, make a left turn and go to San Francisco, make a right turn and go back to New York. Already spoken about how I feel about New York, so I came back. After a very brief stint at Kaplan Test Prep, helping them migrate their products from here's a book, here's a CD-ROM, to this interwebs thing. I joined my first startup. I was the third person on, third founder at a company called Bunk One, which was internet services for summer camps. What we'd call now a SaaS business. Back then we called it ESP. ASP, sorry, we called it ASP.
So tell me, before we get into that, Bunk One and the 8 years you've been there, when you were at Booz & Co., you're seeing, I don't know if you remember or not, but you're back then, this is the hype of the tech boom, the .com and everything. You're seeing all this transformation, you're seeing all this innovation happening. Were you trying to bring any innovation to Booz? You're like, I got to get out of here.
The short answer is mostly no. with exceptions. So like most of the projects I was doing as a consultant there were things like post-merger integration. Like, okay, like when Shell merges its downstream operations with Texaco, how many pipeline accountants do we need? Well, not all of them. Great, so people get fired. Or we go into like a heavy automotive stamping plant in Detroit or in Windsor, which is kind of southern Detroit. It's actually part of Canada that goes below Detroit, so you're actually going south into Canada. But other than that, there's nothing else interesting about Windsor. So we do shop floor walkthroughs, and we see these like 1,000-ton presses stamping out like door panels. Kind of cool, big toys, right? But like, how can I rearrange my shop floor so I don't have to buy a press this year and I can put it off for 2 years?
Right.
Like, it's meaningful to a large company, but it ain't what we're doing
For a
now.
kid that's hungry is nothing. Yeah.
No. So starting about, I think it was at the beginning of 1999, I got put on a project in London, right? So fun, I'm on an expat package, London's cool, the language is more or less
Parents
familiar.
not watching you, you can party and everything.
Yeah, that's been a while already. We're not going to go there if this is family oriented. Yeah, I had fun there too. So there's, again, this was an oil and gas company. This was BP was buying Ackerman.
Okay.
And they hadn't passed the antitrust barriers. So what happens when you're potentially merging is you'll have a team that will be responsible for putting together what the company will look like together, kind of their pro forma, pro-merger financials.
Exactly.
Now the problem is if your merger gets dinged, you can't do it. Those people can't go back to their old jobs. They're contaminated. They know too much about the competition. So obviously a lot of people don't like doing that. That means like you're basically screwed.
Sure.
So we had been taking this kind of internet application that had just been built, where people in each company could upload their own numbers and it'd be merged in the cloud. We didn't say in the cloud back then, because that phrase didn't exist. It would be merged in the cloud, and instantly, after a mere 20, 30 seconds waiting for it to process, instantly give you pro forma merged financials. So the only people that would see it, both sides of it, were us, the consultants. And who cares? I mean, we're not contaminated. So it was actually a really cool application.
Sure.
And that was the first time I'd been on anything like interwebby or internet-ish. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is it. I got to get on this stuff. In a weird sort of way, starting companies and doing what I do now kind of didn't exist when I got out of business school. There was venture capital, wasn't as well known, probably my own damn fault that I figured that out sooner. But the whole idea that we have now about going out, starting a company, raising VC money, like the word entrepreneur didn't really mean anything like that. And if it did, it was almost like, he's an entrepreneur. Like, what do you mean, unemployed? Right? That whole thing didn't exist until about 99, 2000, 2001. So I was kind of just waiting for the world to catch up and for me to figure out, like, that's what I wanted to do.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because now the people that the kids look up to, not the celebrities and sports players anymore. They're looking up to, I want to be the next Zuckerberg, the next Elon Musk.
I hope. There's a lot of pushback now with like the kids on the left where it's like entrepreneurs are evil.
Right.
But yeah, in our world, like that's it. In fact, this is not too crass, but there's a guy who's like, yeah, my son's in college now. He's like, you can't get laid if you don't have a startup. That's kind of cool, right?
That's what it is. Every kid, the Dreamit do that. Then back in '99 wasn't there. So you go there, so you have this epiphany. You see this, and you're like, holy shit, this is gonna be big, and I gotta get involved in that. So you quit. Hopefully, I'm assuming you quit, and you jumped to ship to Kaplan, and then you came to One Bunk One. Which you led it for 8. You did it for 8 years. Your first venture into
not prop tech, but call tech,
call tech, whatever it's called, and then it got sold. Right?
Yeah, not exactly.
Okay.
Right, so it's interesting. So we were in there. I got in there beginning of 2000. Really, really exciting times. 2001, not so exciting. But we muscled through it. We kept going. We grew kind of very well. Somewhere around 2005, I'm like, times are good. It's booming. What can we get for this? The CEO at the time was like, I don't want to do it. I'd rather get, it was very seasonal, right? Summer was where all the revenue came in. So like, let's get through the next summer, see where the revenue is. Let's try to, that'll be the multiple, that'll be the base of the multiples based on. And we'd gone from growing like 50+% a year to just growing like 25, 26%,
Right.
which is still pretty awesome. It was like, oh, wait a second. Like the slope of the line is starting to flatten. Let's go look at it now.
Right.
So I brought in a banker, a really, really great guy. And I said, his name was Lawrence Askowitz. I said, Lawrence, what do you think we can get for a company like this? He's like, well, given where you are, it's about 4 to 6 times your net income, your EBITDA. It's kind of the same for us at that point, pretty close. I said, yeah, that seems about right. I would sell for that. The CEO was like, I'd really like to get, he names a number that's like 8 times EBITDA. And it was one of those markets where if you got a strategic who was really excited and they look beyond the numbers to the synergies and all that, like you could get there. So we had a very kind of realistic conversation with the CEO at the time, saying, hey, it's a bit of a stretch, could happen, but as long as you're going to take a realistic look at whatever the best offer is, and we run a good process, we'll do it. Lawrence beat the bush. He had like 100 different prospects. Like I could have thought of 10 prospects. And Lawrence is coming back, and he's like, well, what about greeting card companies? And I'm like, really? He's like, well, the bunk notes feature that you have, which are messages from parents to the kids, are basic electronic greeting cards. I'm like, well, that's really smart.
That's very creative,
right?
yeah.
So a lot of that, really, really sharp guy, runs a great process. We had a couple bidders at the end. Best bid came in, 5.5 times net income.
Okay.
Like exactly where we thought, even to the higher end. I'm like, damn, I'll take that. The CEO was like, it's just not enough. Right? I needed to be more. I think we can do better. So, went in. I had a kind of heart to heart with the CEO. I said, listen, I've been doing this now. It was a better part of 6.5 years. I'm ready to move on. But I'll tell you what, if you think 5.5 times earnings is too cheap to sell the company, you should be thrilled to buy me out at that price. And after a little hemming and hawing, we agreed that he would buy me out at that price as long as I stayed on for close to a year, find a successor, train the successor up, go through the next summer with him, and then, kind of ramp down, which was good because it's in an annual cyclical business. You're doing different things in different parts of the year. And I understand he wanted me on to help with that knowledge transfer.
Sure.
Fine. So I get out. The CEO hands me my check on January 2nd, 2009. Remember what the world was like then? He's like, should have taken the offer. Fast forward to 2016, they're sold to, I think it's a private equity company. It was doing a roll-up for registration type solutions. Because we're also doing, at that point, enrollment in camp. Difficult to value that because part of that was stock, part of that was cash. And then the company that bought them was just bought about a year ago. And when it all converted, I think at the end of the day, it was actually a higher valuation than I got out, but it was also 10 years later.
Right.
So I'm fine.
Yeah.
Maybe it was a little lower. I don't know. I'm fine. We're all happy. Odd postscript. The school my kids go to had their school dinner 2 nights ago. I'm at the school dinner. I run into the ex-CEO because he had gone to that high school as a kid.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you were at this Bunk One, you've been a consultant. Your process of thinking, your process of analyzing was totally different than coming in to be the third employee in a company.
Yeah. And I was younger and dumber.
Right. What was the transition for you to work in it?
So that's a very good question, right? So first of all, I'd come from consulting,
right.
big company, process-oriented. Let's rationalize
Hierarchy.
our SKUs, understand our pricing. So there was a bit of adjustment there. It wasn't hard for me. There were a couple of times where, I get frustrated. Like the sales team would come in and like, why are we offering all these variations? It's not that difficult.
Right.
The CEO came down and said, listen, right now we just need revenue. We're gonna say yes. Deal with it, and we'll figure it out later, right? Because if we don't get the revenue, it doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter what kind of chaos is going on behind the scenes. So I give him props for that. The other thing I learned was that a lot of the things that large companies look at take almost the same amount of time for a small company, but there's just a lot more zeros on it. So for instance, I looked at one point at what we were paying in merchant fees. It's a credit card processing, merchant fees. And I'm like, yeah, we could switch. I could probably shave 25 basis points, a quarter of a point off of that. And I was looking at my revenue. I'm like, well, that's not worth that much work right now. That was early on. Came back to it 3 years later. I'm like, now it's worth it, right? Same quarter of a percentage point, just a much higher base.
Sure.
So that's the other thing I learned. Like, it's not that they're fundamentally different problems. And it's not even that it's a fundamentally harder problem to solve. In many cases, it's just not worth it at the smaller scale.
Right.
And ideally, you're working at a company where you're creating so much value and growing so fast that you can just suck up the fact that it's going to be inefficient on those other things, for lack of a better word, and just run with what's important.
100%. And like, all this experience is definitely, I'm going to get into it shortly, being on the operation side of taking the third employee and taking it, scaling it until eventually you're getting bought out for 6 years later. I'm going to ask you, but we're not going to get into now, like how that experience transferred being an investor helped you, because you're dealing with startups from every single stage, from pre-seed, seed, and then, pre-idea to all that. You having that experience, right, is like...
I'll be honest, I picked that up separately. It did change me in other ways. Around the time that, that I got bought out, I started making some angel investments. Some of them were very naive. I got very lucky on one of the first...
this is 2007.
2008, I was bought out.
Okay.
Yeah. So I got very lucky on a couple of the early investments. And I kind of hooked. Like if you walk into a casino, you put, $100 down on 17 at the roulette wheel, and you hit it on the first one, you're hooked on roulette, rightly or wrongly.
Okay.
So a couple of early investments paid off, kind of hooked at it. And I started getting better at it. I just hang out with more investors, learning about how they look at things. Made a couple of not so great investments, learned from those too. It's an expensive education. And the thing that I did wrong at Bunk One was I was very heads down in my work. I'm like 110%. We've got work that can keep me busy forever and ever. I'm going to do it. Did not maintain my network that well. Right? I should have been out there growing it. I should have been raising my profile all along. So when I came out of Bunk One, I then ended up working at a family office. And again, I was very heads down. And when I came out, I did a third startup, but it was harder for me to get onto a larger platform. Right. So what I learned a little later was you should always be allocating some time towards maintaining your network or building a platform for yourself. Like what you're doing here, this is a platform for you. Right. You get a readership, a viewership. People know you. It opens more doors for you in the future. Right. And ironically, I started doing that later. Okay. I started interviewing other angel investors when AlleyWatch first came out. I was asked to write a column. One of the few smart things I ever did in my life is I didn't say no right away. Right? I'm like, Bonnie, man, I'm busy. I said, how about X? And picked the topic. I was going to interview other angel investors because not a lot of people were doing that back then. It was good. I could ask the same 20 questions. Right? The same 20 questions to the guys, and whatever was an interesting answer, I'd write up, and I had this little graphic about what they invested in.
I was about to say that graphic is actually pretty cool. I've seen it multiple times.
Yeah, I'm not an artistic guy, but it was easy. It was at least easy to digest, and I did that for a while. And one of the guys that I interviewed was Mark Walken, who was running Dreamit's New York office at the time. And when Mark had decided, hey guys, this is not the part-time job you said it was going to be. You got to bring in someone full-time. Who do you know, Mark? Well, guess what? Right. So it worked. Right. It took a while to build that. You had to look clever about it. And I wish I'd learned that maybe 6 years earlier. Right. I thought that was the question you're going to ask. The investor side, I learned differently.
Right. Well, it's more about the operational experience you had that's able to transfer into the startups you're educating now. But we'll get to...
Sorry. I screwed up. Yes. The answer is yes. And I'll give you a couple of examples. I know what they're going through. And one of the things that I'm very big on are being able to quickly test things at no or very little cost. So the mistake that we made back in 03 or 04, we created a multi-vendor store for supplies for camp, like clothing with logos, without logos, canteens, tents. And we're like, parents are going to come, they're going to buy their stuff there, we're going to make tons of money.
Third-party vendors, you said,
Third-party vendors. Well, there was no Amazon.
Right.
But the camp supply guys.
Sure, yeah.
We could do it all there. We had the whole workflow out. I'm an ops guy, so that was right. Workflow worked out, how the orders got sent to whom. And this was a non-trivial problem. Even today, multi-vendor stores are tough. And we made $10,000 on it. Nothing compared to what we put into it. Try to figure out why. And we realized, okay, parents basically woke up to bunk one when their kid left for camp, and they needed to activate their account to see the photos. At that point, it's too late to buy clothes.
Right.
Like, oops. Now, we could have learned that by just putting a link with a referral code on it to a different store for one season, so you clicked it. So for the cost of, I'm not going to say how much it costs us to build that other store, but for the cost of one line of code, we could have instantly figured out seasonality. We could have found out that this was not meaningful for us. So that's one of the examples I give, and it applies to a lot of startups. Like, oh, you're going to build your entire website, and then you're going to build these features, and you're going to see if it works. Why don't you just mock it up and see if anyone clicks buy now? If they don't click buy now, you're screwed. If they do, it could say coming soon, but at least you know how many people are willing to pay X for what you got. And so that's kind of one small example about how knowing what I know now, I can help startups hopefully learn things the smart way rather than the hard way.
And you just mentioned a few things that is absolutely amazing, and I want to go into. The ability to test things now. Cause the example you brought is, if you create a mock-up of a store, press buy now and see if they come and press it. If they press it and you have multiple things, the data, is correct, then, you have a simple problem. You have a problem that people are willing to pay for. Most times you have people say that, we're going to build it, we're going to come by the streams of thousands of people. Everybody needs what we have. Big problem, we validate it.
Hand waving, right? Okay.
Exactly.
Based on what, right? Yeah, you get that a lot. I don't get a lot of pushback, right? Most people, when you tell them, like, hey, you can test that just by doing this, right. It's like a weight's lifted off their shoulder. Like, you mean I can figure that out now? Damn, I'm going to do that. Or they feel like, I'm halfway done, right? Well, do it before you waste the other half. So it's good. The other way I sometimes say is, like, most businesses, you could model in Excel, right? Like an e-commerce business, I got to pay X dollars to get someone to click on my link, come to the site. A certain percentage of them pop back out. It's not what they want. Some, after they shop there for a little bit, I'll add something to a cart. Then some will abandon it. Some will actually close, and then there's going to be a certain number, dollar amount, average cart value. Yeah. Then you can model in returns too if you want to. But those are really just, you can model that all in Excel. They're formula. Sure. When you first build it, everything is guesswork. Yeah. But then you can systematically go back and say, how can I prove this easily and cheaply? Sure. If you want to be really sophisticated about it, you play with each variable, see where it's most sensitive and prove it in that order. Sure. Sometimes you just prove all of them. Like, to prove what's your cost per click going to be. It's a $100 AdWords campaign. See what you get. Right. It's only going to get cheaper as you optimize from most cases. But at least you'll have the ceiling on your costs. And then when an investor says, how do you know it's true? Well, I tested it. It's not a guess.
Right. I mean, that's such a different thing. These days, it's so cheap, technically, to do anything. You don't have to do any type of custom code. You can throw everything up to the cloud. Back in the day, you had to have an actual, place to store it. You had to build a custom code to build your website. Now you just go to Wix or go to Squarespace, whatever it is, throw something together, host it on Amazon, and then take a Zapier and throw a bunch of integrations, and you can test it out. Simple.
What used to cost $5 million, 10 years later it costs $500,000. A few years after that, $50,000, and now arguably it costs you nothing but sweat.
Right, exactly. So then, when a startup comes to you, what exactly are you looking for? Are you looking at the team? Are you looking at the distribution model? Are you looking at the product? Are you going to ask them, hey, have you actually tested it, something like this?
So what I look for and other people look for varies on the stage and the type of company. Right. But let's start with kind of an overall view. Like, a lot of people are like, oh, is it the jockey or the horse? So I don't use that at all. Okay. Start like a chain, right? Doesn't matter how strong the third and fourth links in the chain are, if the seventh link is busted. Okay. Right? Only one link has to be weak for it not to be investable and unlikely to succeed. Caveat, some guys succeed despite, not because. I mean, you're lucky. It's like, do you play blackjack?
I don't play blackjack, no, yeah.
Like always split aces and eights. You'll get somebody at the table, she or he won't split the eights, it drives you nuts, and then they get a 5. And they get 20. It kills me when they're right, it happens. But we're talking about odds. So when we look at it, I'm looking at each one of the critical elements to link in the chain, and if any link fails, it fails. So the team is part of it. So what I look for in a team slide, the industries I'm in now, it's very important to have industry experience. Like if you're not in the construction industry or you don't have some background, your family wasn't in it, you didn't grow up in it, you didn't work there and then leave, you got no street cred and you probably don't know what you're talking about. Right? It's a very hard industry for someone to kind of just hum a few bars and fake it, or to work by analogy. There's too many things that'll trip you up.
Sure.
On the flip side, I love to see companies with prior entrepreneurial expertise. And I honestly don't even care as much if it's a tech startup or just a small business. Just seeing that somebody's held out a pen for someone to sign a check or sign a contract and gotten them to do it, that's meaningful. I think there's something different about the genetic makeup of someone who closes sales and someone who doesn't.
Right.
It's not genetic, it's learnable. Some people love it in naturals, and that scares me. I had to learn it. So I'm looking for things like that. The stage that I invest in right now, I'm usually a Series A or a seed extension investor. So I'm looking for traction.
Right.
Traction for me is almost always revenue.
Right.
And I look somewhere, my rough rules of thumb are somewhere between 100,000 and $1 million plus annual recurring revenue. If it's not software subscription, it's like transactional, or that maybe needs to be a little higher.
Right.
If it's services, I don't generally count that at all. It doesn't scale like a tech startup. I have a whole article about why traction is kind of a squishy word. But generally speaking, I'm looking for that. Now, there may be other indicators of traction. On the health side, for instance, you often won't get paid pilots. You have to do an unpaid proof of concept. But if a company comes in, like, hey, we got 6 POCs, all of them are 80, 90% of the way through. Customers are all willing to sign up for the paid one when it runs out. That's good. Like, that'll check the box. Or if the business model is not monetizing now, we need to get to X first. And we have one company that's kind of West Coast-ish that way. Then other things will come. By and large, I'm looking, here's another way to put it, I'm looking for a proxy for product market fit. And somebody paying you money is a good sense, right?
Exactly.
It's a good sense that you've got a product people want because they're writing you a check.
Right. So you're looking for somebody, it's not someone, hey, we're going to make money in 10 years from now. It's not about that we're incurring all this loss. But actually, even if they're incurring all that loss, it's more about like a clear path to some type of revenue.
Yeah, so the strongest companies in some ways are ones where they come in and like, hey, this is how much we're burning. This is how fast we're growing. If we had to, we could be cash flow neutral tomorrow, right? We just don't put as much money into growth. I cut back my AdWords spend. Maybe I only have 1 salesperson instead of 3. I grow slower, but I can do it. Because then they want money. They don't need money.
Exactly.
And that gives you more leverage in any kind of negotiation.
Gotcha.
They're not always at that. You don't always have that option.
Right.
But it's nice to be in that position.
Gotcha. So from a founder perspective, we have industry experience, some type of prior background in type of entrepreneurial thing, not necessarily as entrepreneurial, but he's done something on his own.
Show me you can close sales.
Exactly. I think it's actually really cool when an entrepreneur is hiring, they're able to apply that to the person they're going to hire. Like, have they gone through any type of obstacles? Have they done any initiative on their own to see that they could close something, could do something, which I think is very valuable too.
It can be, right? So there's a meme in our world, like A teams should only play with A players. And my response is, you should be so lucky. It's great, right? I mean, you shouldn't knowingly go out there, I'm going to go get a B plus player because that's what I like to work with.
Right.
But the truth is, a good company makes the most of the material they have.
Right.
I forget who told me this. It's like, you could make a hamburger from like grade A quality beef, but why, the whole idea of having a hamburger is you're using okay meat and making it taste good.
Right.
So, I don't expect everyone to have been the third person on at Google. I mean, that's, by definition, you've only got one of those, right? And then the third person on Facebook, third person on Amazon. There's not that many of those.
Right.
But a good team, solid, that's getting the 1 or 2 core things right, that's critical. And if you're, and I've been in these situations before, I've been in a situation where I'm like, listen, this one person on the team is good at what he or she does. Probably not going to rise further than that. has some drawbacks, but I can adjust the way I work with them to get the most out of that person, and hopefully they enjoy that as well. It's just a more, I think, just around it. It's a great work environment when the person's being used to their utmost. That's fine with me. Now, if it's an all-A team, it's even better.
Right. Well, the question is, our A team, goes back to the famous big debate. Are entrepreneurs made? Are they born? Is someone that some become? Same
Well,
thing
that's
is
a
like,
good question, right? So is a great sprinter made or born?
so they're not. So that's the thing. Where does talent come from?
Well,
Is
I
it
mean, you could say both, right?
right?
I mean, you could have the genes to be a great sprinter, and if you just don't run and you're sitting in front of a computer all day, you never know.
Right.
Or at some point, like some of it's learnable. Like, will you become Usain Bolt no matter how much you run? Probably not. You'll get a lot faster. So, we call it a great entrepreneur. What we really mean is potentially successful entrepreneur.
Right.
So I do believe that most people can be taught. There's some people who just don't have it in them. It's not for them. They don't have the skill set or the nerves or the mentality. There are other things they can do in life that hopefully will be rewarding for them. But to a large degree, it's learnable.
No, it's something that, you have to go through that experience. It's funny. I love how you bring examples from everything. Hamburger, Usain Bolt, anything else. On your blog post on I Am an Angel, I think it's called.
As angels see it.
As angels see it. You bring a lot of references from the Bible. Noah's Ark, for example, is one. The 9 steps over there. Now also the Jewish holiday of Purim is coming up in 2 weeks, and you bring.
Did I write one about that? I don't
You
remember.
did about Esther.
Yeah.
You wrote about what 9 lessons entrepreneurs can learn from the Book of Esther.
I read it last year, actually.
Was it? Yeah, a few years back, I think. And you brought the 9th, actually phenomenal examples. So a few of the examples you brought was an entrepreneur's success is 9+ years, because I think the Feast of Purim or the Purim thing took 3.5 years, something like that.
The actual story took 9
Right.
years, which I wasn't paying attention the first 40 years of my life, and I didn't notice that.
And you brought tremendous amount of examples from there. Another thing you brought was your first customer. Don't always rely on your first customer, and that was related to. I forgot what.
So when I look at traction for a company, it's not so much the first or second customer that matters to me. I want to know how they get the third, fourth, and fifth.
Right.
I don't know where they got that first customer. First customer could have been their cousin, and then it's like an awkward Thanksgiving dinner if they didn't try it.
Sure.
Also, that first customer may just have idiosyncratic requirements. So it's good. It's money.
Right.
It's better than zero for sure.
Yeah.
But when I'm looking at it, like part of that proxy for product market fit, if I have the choice between a company that's doing $200,000 in revenue from one customer, paying it all, versus one that's got 4 customers paying 50 each, like all other things being equal, I get more proof points on the second.
That's such an interesting point, because most people think I'm gonna get that one flagship customer, that logo, which is very important. And I love how you say it like that. It's not, you're looking for multiple customers to actually see that people will buy it. It's fun on your blog actually. So the first blog post you wrote on that blog was about a company called Comstack.
Yep, I know Michael.
Actually, and I had the opportunity to interview Michael too. And in it you write, I see Comstack. They came by me. I'm not sure if I should invest or not. I always use that. You say if I had more investor experience, or somebody more in the background of what they're doing, I probably would have joined them. But otherwise, my gut says not to do it.
So so that was actually really early on, and there's a couple of good things. So number one, you may have heard this phrase, like nothing would make me happier than you proving me wrong.
Yes, correct.
So I liked it. I liked what he was building. It was intuitively interesting. There were a couple of questions about how people would use it. Like this required, without going too deep into Comstack, it required a certain amount of crowdsourcing of information that maybe the people we were getting the data from might not want to be forthcoming or entirely honest about. Right. In fact, I won't go there. I was going to say this. If you ever want an applause line at the right prop tech event, just say, who's lied to this company this week.
So when a new entrepreneur comes to you and says, hey, Andrew, either I'm looking to start the startup or I just started the startup, what advice you go ahead and give him?
Wow, that's one of those broad questions. It's tough. Like, it really depends on who the person is. But if you're a brand new founder, the best thing I can say is talk to as many people as you can about your idea. Don't worry about, oh, so-and-so is going to steal my idea. Most people are never going to quit their day job. The value you get from putting that idea out there and getting people to bounce at it is critical. And you have to give them permission to be mad, to mean at you, right? So you got to say things like you tell them the idea, and you come back, oh, I love that idea, it's awesome. It's like, hey, break my idea.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you mean? It's like, listen, I may quit my day job and spend 3 years of my life working on this. If there's an obvious flaw in it, I want to know now, right? Before I lose 3 years of it and tell me, like, my wife's mad at me and, like, we're in a rental unit, we're living in my parents' basement. So break my idea. If I can't fix it, I shouldn't be doing it. Right? Or, nothing can hurt my feelings. Tell me. And do things like, would you pay $5 for this? Of course I'll pay $5 for this. How about you think a lot of your friends? Would your peers also? Oh, no, they're cheap. They're cheap bastards. They would never pay $5 for it. Right? You're not going to hurt my feelings by saying you wouldn't buy it. You don't want me to think you're cheap. But if I ask you, like, other customers in the space, like, oh, yeah, they're not going to do it. That's probably more indicative. Right? So you got to go out there, open mind, willing to talk. Don't worry, generally speaking, about people stealing your ideas. And get that feedback. Make people comfortable giving you unvarnished, unbiased, like no holds barred, no punches held type feedback. Because at the end of the day, you're putting a lot of yourself on the line, financially, reputationally. Get as much of that de-risked and worked through as you possibly can before jumping off that cliff.
Right. Gotcha. And that's so valid. I mean, but the entrepreneurs have to know, and I would love to get into it, but we'll get into a different time. The feedback loop, how to give good feedback, and how to be able to receive the feedback from employee perspective, entrepreneur, VC to entrepreneur.
You want to know my trick?
Yeah.
I put a big smile on my face and say, listen, I got to warn you, I'm a dick. And after that, I can say whatever I want, and they think it's funny.
Well, you know what? That once you have that, like they call it the accusation audit, sort of. And so once you remove that thing, it's like example. If I were to tell you, hey, Andrew, I'm doing this interview now, but I'm very, very fearful, and I'm scared.
You've disarmed me now. If you're nervous, I'm making you feel comfortable.
Exactly.
So they're telling me, no, you're not being a dick. No, I really am. Right? Or here's my favorite. I want to be respectful of your time. What I really mean is, I've got 5 minutes. I got to go. But I do want to be respectful of other people's time. I do have like that sense of it's the only thing that can never be replaced.
Gotcha. Right.
So I may be a dick, but it's only because I respect your time.
So what is one non-obvious habit that has made you a better person?
Non-obvious habit. It ain't flossing. I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that one.
So, Andrew, sitting, graduating MBA from college in Chicago. He has a whole world in front of him. He could go to booze, stay there and drink as much booze as possible, go to Goldman, go become a barista at Starbucks or do something else, whatever it may be. What message would you tell your younger self?
The stakes right now are as low as possible. Right? Before you're married, before you have kids, before you have a mortgage, before you have tuition payments, you may think things are, you can't take risks. It's never going to get easier to take risks.
Right.
So if you want to do it, find a way to make it happen sooner rather than later.
I like that. Andrew,
Cool.
Thank you so much. This has been an absolute pleasure.
Totally my pleasure. Thanks for
Anything I
having
can
me.
do for you, for Dreamit, if your family, please reach out anytime.
One of these days I will ask you for a favor.
Thank you.
Cool.